Thank you. So as an entrepreneur, I'm sitting there listening to the mayor talk about needing money, and an idea came to me that was launched in Rikers, New York, and it's called the Social Impact Bond. Has anybody heard about the Social Impact Bond? A few people, yeah. So this, briefly, a Social Impact Bond essentially it provides an opportunity for investors to commit to seeing a community transformed, and city government essentially pays the return on the investment if the metrics are hit, if the transformational metrics are hit. In other words, if the city wants to employ 1,000 people and wants to get them on the job, then investors would invest the initial capital into helping get that program up and running. There would be an independent evaluation party that would say, we're going to evaluate whether you hit these metrics, and then if you hit them or exceed them, the investor gets paid back a certain percentage on the initial investment that they made. But if they don't hit them, the investor eats the loss, and it's done and over with. So it's an additional way for the city to raise that additional money to move it forward. So that was my entrepreneurial mind revving up. And then the last one, Five Gals Cleaning. I thought about this conversation that you guys are having about the no slumlords, right? And all the houses that are empty. And what about if Five Gals expanded to include a construction company that would do all the internal renovations and help the landlords comply with this new ordinance that's been passed? That could possibly increase the business for Five Gals, right? So just a couple ideas there that came to me while we were sitting there in the last couple of minutes. In addition to the mayor's comments, I wanted to add one more piece, and have you ever heard of the Gross National Happiness Index? It's not gross, but it's the Gross National Happiness Index. I would suggest that on top of GDP, gross domestic product, in terms of evaluating how well a country is doing, that we add the Gross National Happiness Index to provide a holistic indicator of how a city is really doing. Because the GDP only shows us how much we're consuming. It's how much product, how much transactions are happening, how much sales there are of products, but it doesn't show you the larger picture of how human beings are doing and how happy they are living in their country. So I'd suggest that as an additional attachment. My comments this last session are essentially around risk and faith. For business people, they're always thinking about risk. They're minimizing their risk, they're mitigating their risks, they're internalizing processes and things that would hamper their bottom line. They're always thinking about how do I mitigate and keep myself from assuming too much risk. And for people of Christians, it's about faith. How much faith do I have that God is going to provide for this vision that He's given us? How much faith will I exercise to move forward in this process? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the things not seen, right? And so I've heard business people always talking about risk and a little bit of faith, and Christian folks talking about faith and a little bit of risk. And I would like to posit, I would like to suggest that they're the same thing. They're exactly the same thing. It's just that I think it's even harder to exercise faith than it is to exercise discerning risk, because it's things not seen, right? You wake up with this vision and you think, oh my God, how am I going to accomplish this? I don't know. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know where to go. And you start praying, you start asking God to lead you into the right conversations, the right contexts, the right people with the right skills. And if you're patient enough, you eventually get to that place. If you're impatient, you stumble, you make mistakes, you get frustrated, right? So for me, the risk conversation and the faith conversation, they're absolutely the same thing. So what I want to say with that is that business folks, it's the same conversation same issue that you're thinking about. And for Christian folks, it's the same thing. So it's time to come together. It's time to share your journey on risk and on faith and see that there's a very similar storyline that goes behind that. Okay? So, what I want to do is I want to transition into how do you create, I'm going to give you a couple examples. One is Gingrass Global, Rami Gingrass out of Detroit, Michigan, just a suburb north of Detroit, started a company called Gingrass Global. It's gingrassglobal.com if you're interested, Gingrass global.com. She was a wealth manager for 32 years, helping people really manage their money, helping to maximize their investments, figuring out what investment instruments to invest their money in. And she realized that there was this situation that was occurring in her local church. She attends Kensington Church. It's in the northern suburb of Detroit. It's a Willow Creek Association church, so it's a fairly large mega church. She was the head of she was a missions pastor for the church, and she was taking these groups of members from Kensington on these trips internationally to India, to Japan, to Africa, and she was taking business folks with her. She went to India. She tells a story of going to India, and she was with some business folks, and the business folks wanted to start implementing business ideas, U.S., kind of American-based business ideas to solve a problem in India. And they were going hard at it, and they were using all their MBA knowledge to really try to solve these issues. And eventually what happened was that the local leaders basically said to Rami, would you ask these guys not to be in the conversation? Because they're stepping on our toes, and we're really kind of getting upset because they're not understanding all the dynamics that are represented in the conversation and the issue that we're facing. They're suggesting what seem to be simple solutions that will make the situation worse than make it better. And so that happened to her a number of times as she was traveling around the globe with her team. And she decided, she started praying about it, and she said, God, what's going on here? I mean, these folks are MBA grads. They went to Harvard. They went to Yale. They went to U of M. They went to all the USC. They went to Stanford. They went to all these great universities. What is the issue that's driving this dissonance to occur in a local country? And she, as she talked to more and more business leaders and she engaged them, she realized that when you go to MBA school in the United States, the pacing is very fast. It's oriented towards a quarterly perspective. How do I get greater returns on a quarterly basis for my company? And if I'm going to graduate with an MBA, then I'm going to go serve a company and help those shareholders really see some significant returns on their investment in this company. And those returns are usually quarterly based or annually based, right? So the pacing is what was the issue for the MBA folks that were going on these mission trips. So she started praying more and more about it, and she thought, what do I do? How do I create this connection point for business folks to really fulfill more and more of their kingdom calling by being part of this conversation and traveling? And she came up with the name the Aruka House. It's a Hebrew word, and it's basically a place where you find shalom, peace, a place where you find your fullest expression of who God has wired you to be. And so what she started to do is she started to take any business person that was wanting to go on a mission trip. They were going to go through a process of what she calls detoxification. Detoxification from what? They're not intoxicated. Actually, the way she explains this is that a lot of business folks they come wired to define success in a certain way that dehumanizes them. And so she said, there's a lot of business folks who are walking around with a sense of shame because there's never been an affirmation of business skills within the kingdom conversation. There's never been an affirmation from the pulpit of folks who are operating the marketplace being affirmed that you are on task for God, that you're doing something of significance and of importance to society. And what she learned was part of the reason why that hasn't been part of the expression of the church is that two-sided. One is business folks feel guilty. I can't tell you how many business folks have come to me and said, man, I would love to do your job. I would love to be involved in what you're doing in terms of economic development, Christian community development. I would love to be doing that. I mean, I like making money, but I would feel so much more fulfilled if I was doing what you were doing. And I would be baffled by those conversations because I didn't understand the challenges that some business leaders face in terms of a quarterly goal or an annual goal. I didn't understand the burden and the weight of that and how much of a sacrifice some business leaders need to make in order to be able to accomplish those goals. And so she developed the Aruka House for business leaders to be detoxed from either their educational attainments and the principles that they learned in MBA school, or how they defined success after they graduated from the MBA program and went to work in corporate America. And the conversations and the realizations and the aha moments that are coming from these interactions have been amazing. So a few stories. Some of the guys being driven to be successful, it was about meeting their father's expectations of being successful, not wanting to disappoint their fathers. Some of the gals was about identity and living in a man's world, but trying to be successful in a man's world was one of the most frustrating things they ever did. But they were wired to be in business. They were wired to be in the marketplace. And they felt that they had always hit a ceiling. And they were frustrated, and they were bitter and judgmental. And so she takes them through this process of getting detoxed from the burden of the guilt, from the burden of the judgments, from the burden of defining success in a certain way that's more worldly than it is from the kingdom perspective. And then she begins to engage them in these consultations with these ministry leaders about how they can help grow the business and how they can help expand the impact of the ministry. So she formed something called Gin Grass Global Groups. It's essentially 4 levels of engagement for business leaders. One level is that detox level. The second level is providing consultation for the ministry leader. The third level is traveling to that country to be able to help the local leaders really flesh out the vision for that local ministry. And then fourthly, it's an investment opportunity for those local leaders to be able to invest in the local business. So when I think about the ecosystem that represents, there's a reconciliation of humanity that happens in that context. There's a internal reconciliation, like all the business leaders are coming to a place where they accept that they've been wired that way by God. They don't need to feel guilty about the passion and the drive and the desire that they have to be successful, but they need to redefine what success is, okay? And they need to understand that in order to do that in a healthy way, they need to do it within a community of folks that are experiencing the same kind of thing, you know? So they can talk about, a lot of them are resonating with each other and saying, that's exactly the same kind of experience and the same kind of expectations my parents put on me. And they're unrealistic. I don't know why I keep driving myself to be so successful and working late and missing seeing my children and missing, my marriage is about to fall apart and all those issues. And so it's been a fascinating, she just launched a couple years ago, Gin Grass Global, and this last year she launched the Gin Grass Global groups for business leaders. Now she's beginning to travel and take folks to Israel, to Japan, to India. In Detroit, she's doing a lot of good work in Detroit, helping to support social entrepreneurs to grow their businesses and launch their businesses really well. So the ecosystem, again, is helping business leaders really understand themselves, understand the call of God on their lives, get detoxed, helping ministry leaders to also be able to receive the business people now. Because for the sake of the ministry leaders, it's about detoxing from this idea that business is evil. I was talking to someone here, and they said, I can't remember the word that you used. Where are you? There you are. What was the word you used with me? You were talking about that business is carnal and murky, and you probably have some other words that Christians use about business leaders, right? There's this undertone in the Christian body that people in the marketplace are suspect. I wanted to call that out. Like, that's a lie from the pit of hell. I mean, those are our brothers and sisters created in the image of God, trying to do what they can do to really honor God in what they do and honor their families and honor the marketplace with their gifts. And the last thing we need to do is to continue to ostracize the business community for their passion and their desire to see people's pain points met. That's the last thing we need to do. We need to love one another. We need to receive one another. We need to understand that God has wired each one of us differently and that we need each other to solve these problems that we're facing in Fresno. So I really want to encourage you to like have a come to Jesus moment, you know? Like if you've judged a business person or business people or the marketplace as an evil institution, as a place that you would never step foot or you would never align yourself with, then I want to encourage you to be convicted by the Holy Spirit and to understand that that brother or sister who's exercising their gift in the marketplace is created in the image of God. I want to encourage business leaders as well. You know, that if you're looking at ministry folks, people in the church, and all they want is your checkbook, and all they want is you to fund international ministry and mission trips, and serve as a deacon and open the doors and shut the church, that you've also judged the church. You've also judged ministry leaders. And I want to ask you to go to your brothers and sisters that are in ministry leadership, and I want to ask you to follow the Spirit's leading as He shows you what it is He wants you to say and what it is He wants you to do. I feel like there's a moment of reconciliation that's emerging amongst us. Because the only way that we're going to solve these problems that we're facing is if we do it together. You know? Is if we spend time listening to each other's challenges and each other's journeys and each other's passions. It's the only way that we're going to solve these. And, by the way, it's the only way that folks who don't know Jesus are going to believe that Jesus really exists. Right? That's the only way it's going to happen. So, another example of an ecosystem and how it's working. I'm connected to an organization in Chicago called Blue 1647. It's blue1647.com, the number 1647. It's a technology incubator, just like Bitwise Industries. Emil Camry, a Haitian guy that went to Northwestern and graduated summa cum laude, came back into the city and was really passionate about launching a tech incubator and an opportunity for people in the local community to be able to access technology and learn how to code and learn how to develop apps and learn how to develop websites. And I have never met a more humble man in my life. This guy essentially invested all of his money, all of his relationships, all of his more than what he even represented into launching this business, this tech incubator called Blue 1647. Why did he do this? He was a professor at North Park University. North Park University is a Covenant university in Chicago, and he couldn't. Hey, somebody went to North Park. He started encountering students who were saying, you know, I'm going to graduate, but I don't know where I'm going to work. I don't know what to do with my degree. Can you help me find work? And he was teaching social entrepreneurship classes at North Park University. And they were asking him, student after student was asking him, help me find how to position my gift set and my education in the market. And so he said, well, you know, I keep coming back to teaching these same classes and the students continue to come to me to ask me for jobs. He said, I got to do something to be able to provide an environment where young people can be employed. So that's when he decided to do some research, and he found that the tech industry is probably one of the fastest industries in terms of growth. And he said, I'm going to put all my marbles in the tech industry. And so he went and he hired a coder and a guy who develops apps. He said, I want you to start teaching classes to veterans, to young people, to high schoolers, to, and then we're going to have a space where young people can come in and do a 24-hour hackathon. So they all come over to his space, and they spend 24 hours trying to develop solutions for city problems. You know, like whether it's access to healthy food. Can we develop an app that will show people where there's healthy food available? And like Yelp.com. Very similar. He went and he met with the commissioner for the Department of Health, and he asked the commissioner for the Department of Health, what are the 10 most significant issues that people in Chicago are facing when it comes to their health? He gave him that list, and he said, we're going to try to solve at least half of those for you. So he brought that list back to Blue 1647. He sat down with he invited community leaders into a conversation, and he said, here are the 10 top health issues facing our city. What can we do about these things? People started to talk. They ended up collaborating with technology, with apps developers and website developers. And they said, you guys come and you're going to serve these community leaders. We want you to listen to the issues that they're expressing in community. And then you're going to do a 24-hour hackathon, and you're going to come up with a solution for each one of these 10 issues. They came up with 5 solutions for 5 of the issues. And now the city is using those apps to help solve childhood obesity, access to food in food deserts, access to city services, a couple of other ones. So he basically said, I understand that the problems are much bigger than our capacity, so I need to create a space where it's okay for elected officials to come in and have a conversation with other folks, where people who develop apps can come in and have a conversation with other folks, where people who are community leaders can come in and have opportunity to have these conversations. He's now developed a space where faith leaders in the community can come in and use his space and listen to a broader conversation about the situations that are going on in the city of Chicago. So, and now he's getting invitations to go to he just went to St. Louis to start a Blue 1647 in St. Louis. He's been asked to start 3 other sites in the city of Chicago, and one of those sites is at our local church, River City Community Church. And so he has figured out how to be gracious and humble and insightful and engaging and inviting other people into the conversation so that they can develop solutions that are sustainable throughout the Chicagoland area. My hope for Fresno is that similar to what Jake has done at Bitwise, and where's the other guy that's here that's with the IdeaWorks, Fresno IdeaWorks? Are you here still?
I think he left.
He left? Okay, yeah. So Fresno IdeaWorks is another organization that's doing some great stuff in terms of makerspace. But my hope is that as a result of today's time together and as a result of the conversations that you've had in the workshops that you've attended, that something has sparked to help you think, I need to go out and reach out to this person that I've been thinking about reaching out to, or I met someone today that I should be reaching out to build a collaborative opportunity to launch a business and to consider how together we can help transform the city of Fresno. So I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you for having been here. Are there any questions with regard to what I've said?
We do have time for a few questions. First of all, let me just say thank you, Ivan.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And we have time for a few questions. Raise your hand, I'll come to you with the mic. What's stirring in you? What thought or questions on your heart or mind? Oh, I can see you all want to go home early today. All right. Yes.
This may have been addressed somewhat with the City Builders Roundtable, but maybe a model where if there's anybody like me, you've got ideas that keep you awake all night, every night, and good ideas, but coming to events like this and getting the opportunity to speak to other people that have ideas, but in being productive and proactive, maybe something in a local sense where there's a regularly occurring forum or meeting or what have you, so that we can maybe prevent redundancy where we're all trying to do the same thing and not even aware of each other's efforts, but instead band together and be more productive and even more conducive to helping and benefiting one another.
Sounds like a great idea for a meeting at Peeves Public House, don't you think? That stuff happens there all the time, right?
Yeah.
What do you think, Ivan?
Yeah, Randy and I were talking about Brad Feld. He wrote the book Startup Communities. He's got a copy of it somewhere on the. Let me grab it real quick. So Brad essentially says one of the key ideas around creating an ecosystem where startups are nurtured and encouraged and supported is this idea of having so many events on the calendar that people can't go to every event or every gathering, but they go to the ones that most interest them. And I think as a community, we need to say, let's start doing some things together. Let's start sponsoring a meetup, once a month or twice a month. Let's start inviting speakers in to talk about what it takes to do investment in social enterprises. Let's have a business venting process where everybody has to sign a do not disclose agreement so that you can pitch your idea and it's safe with that environment and that you can get wise counsel from that. So he advocates for creating this environment where there's multiple events going on, so many that you can't go to all of them as part of the strategy for startups. So.
Another question here.
I really appreciate the effort you took to learn about our area.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you would give some input in regards to how the drought is affecting the Central Valley and our business community.
Well, one is, right? Pray. How many times in the Bible do you see no rain and famine and prayer? I know historical water rights are a significant issue, and who has access to that water first. And I know that there's this initiative up in the Sacramento Valley to do these huge tunnels to provide access to the water in the north in the Sacramento Valley into San Joaquin Valley. And I know that the folks in the north are trying to stop that because they think it's going to deplete all the water sources for the farmers up in the north end of up in the Sacramento Valley. That particular issue is one that, it's got to be a large, just like the California, what is it called? California Partnership in the San Joaquin Valley? Yeah. They're having this collaborative conversation amongst 8 counties about what do we do about water access. I think that needs to broaden to include the Sacramento Valley so that you guys can solve the problem together.
What about water tech here locally?
Well, you've got your wet incubator, right? The water, what is it? What? Yeah, you've got that incubator, and I think there's some great innovative solutions that are coming out of the work that's going on in that place. I would encourage any of you that's interested in access to water in Fresno to go visit the Wet Technology Center. There's some amazing stuff going on in that space.
In fact, what they're trying to do, what Jake Soberall's trying to do with tech in general, making Fresno a hub for tech, Fresno State is trying to do right now with, I think they're calling it Blue Tech for water technologies, both here and at UC Merced. I think that's being dealt with. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, I had one question. What would you say is the underlying reason for, you've done research on Fresno, is what you said, so I'm curious, I haven't had as much time to do research as I'd like in terms of society and classes and things like that. I've taken some sociology classes, et cetera, for general ed, but in Fresno, I've done work on the other side of 180, the south side of 180, like more of the lower ends of the towns. I've been all over the town. What do you think, is there an underlying main reason? Like, what is the main reason for the glass ceiling that a lot of these people, like, you see generational after generational, the cycle repeats itself. Like, I come from a background where I wasn't born wealthy or anywhere near that, but I was taught hard work and motivation, and that's going to make you succeed when you put those two together and follow through. So do you think it's just maybe like how people are raised and they keep staying in that same cycle that seems to limit themselves? Because you keep seeing it on the media, and I don't know if anyone changes face necessarily when they're in an interview versus in real life interaction, but it just makes me wonder what is, if any, one, I don't know if I could just say if there's one reason, because there's always
Right.
a bunch of reasons, but what do you think is the reason that cycle continues?
I'll answer that in two ways. I think the work that Dr. Matthew Gendian is doing at Fresno State has a significant answer to that question. I would encourage you to read his research. He sent me all of his PowerPoints that he uses when he goes and makes presentations. I think his perspective is an important perspective. I also think that sometimes our lens as it relates to why people of a certain ethnic group or a certain socioeconomic level suffer, and some of our perspective is, why can't they work hard? Why can't they buckle down and be diligent and do the things that need to be done to be successful? Why can't they? Why can't they? Why can't they? That's one perspective of the situation. The other perspective is, what is it that has created this generational poverty over and over and over and over again? What are the systemic issues that create these brick walls that they cannot, as much as they would try to, they cannot surpass? What is it that's deeply ingrained in their experience and in their journey that has prohibited them from being successful? I think once we start to ask that question and we begin to listen, then we'll understand more what's going on. It's not as easy as lifting yourself up by your bootstraps. It's not as easy as going out there and working hard, because racism still exists in our country. Classism still exists even more significantly in our country, right? And unless we're willing to recognize and begin to have conversations along those levels, we're never going to come to a real solution and a real understanding of the issues in community.
We have time for one more question.
I was wondering, what is some resources for the ground level startup of trying to get a social entrepreneurship off the ground? I mean, I know how to do business. I've managed businesses, and I get all that. But as far as putting all the legal ducks in a row before you even start, to make sure it doesn't fall in on you.
Yeah. So on the startup side, I mean, in Chicago, we have all the universities that have launched a social entrepreneurship track. And so there's the heads of the social entrepreneurship department or the heads of the social entrepreneurship program. I'm sure California State CSU has some entrepreneurial iteration, some social entrepreneurial iteration on its campuses. Fresno State might have some. But I would look to the local educational institutions to see what professors represent a strong iteration of social entrepreneurship, and begin to kind of just hang out at their student gatherings, go and talk to them and say, here's what I'm trying to do, these are the kinds of challenges I'm facing, and reach out to them. And then I don't know if there's any other kinds of incubators or accelerators here in the city that are not tech-oriented, but they're more oriented towards social entrepreneurship. You said Blue Sky, Randy, was one of those. Is there any other one that anybody knows of? In terms CDFI, the Community Development Financial Institution. Those are some good entities. CDFIs are really interesting. I don't know. I'm not going to go into CDFIs. Just look up Community Development Financial Institutions and try to connect with the one here in Fresno. They have a good lens on economic development, access to investment, and probably can connect you with mentors that will help you along the way. So, all right. Thank you so much for your time and for being here today.